I remember getting two whoopings during my childhood. One was when my mother was actually trying to whoop my younger brother for doing something. And another was when we didn't tell our mother about something. And I remember, of course, not wanting to get a whooping. I remember thinking, whoopings were like horrible. And I would see actually there were some people who actually whooped their children. Back then they used switches, like they take a branch and they would actually whoop their children in front of people. And I remember I had family members that got whoopings in front of us. And I remember looking at their legs and thinking, gosh, that must hurt, along with the screaming, the mom, I won't do it anymore, the hollering. But I also too remember the face of the person giving the whooping. It was just something about me looking at faces. I remember looking at the family member's face, and I saw so much anger. I saw like really angry, and I saw it even on my mother's face. And my mother actually had stopped whooping us at some point. Um, like I said, I only recall two whoopings that I got, and I tried to do right. I tried to be decent, a good girl, because I didn't like whoopings. I didn't, and we used to get paddled by our teachers. I got a paddle by Mr. Hand. God love him, rest in peace. And he was truly Mr. Hand. He was handy with his paddle. I mean, he had a nice long wood paddle. And I remember thinking he must have had that done in shop. It was one of those paddles that, my goodness, it was thick and it was long, and I didn't want to be paddled by that. And I would see the boys and they would jump up. They would jump and be like, woo, it felt like the butt was on fire. Excuse me, sorry. But I remember just believing, looking at my mother's face, and like I said, after a while she stopped whooping us, and she more or less turned to communication. She started talking to us. She started asking us questions, why you do that, and start talking to us more, and open up conversation that we felt like we could talk to her. Even my youngest brother, my mother, we felt like we could tell her stuff, you know. And I think that was one of the biggest things that my mother did for us. And I later would find out the reason why, because what she saw, how she saw her siblings whooped. Often they got whooped. And I believe it was so close, as my mom was sharing, so close to reminding you about slavery. Of course, not being there, but seeing the pictures, the portrayal of people during treatment during slavery, and the whoopings, the lashes. And I read that, it's something that was going on for a long time, a very long time. And I, it was a way, basically, corporate punishment to keep people under control. When you think about slavery, when you think about schools and teachers being able to paddle their kids. Now, I believe that they said there are still some schools that do that, but in to shed light into why I too stopped whooping my children. I didn't want to whoop them in the first place. I really didn't feel like my mom, that it was the best way to do something. And I was thinking of my son, and when I last whooped him. I know my daughter, it was probably about 5-6 years ago. Or longer, actually. I don't know, maybe she was 6 or 7, and now she's like 12. So that's about right. She just turned 12. And I remember being so angry that she was teasing her brother. And I kept telling her to stop. And my son started crying. And I was just so angry that I spanked her. I took her out in the garage, and I didn't want her father to spank her because he has a heavier hand. And I went in and spanked her, and I didn't want to do it. And, my daughter even told me after that, she said, Mom, I was crying, but it didn't hurt. And I said, Kayla, that was God protecting you. Because I know, Lord knows, I did not want to spank her, but I felt like I had to. I felt like I had to tell her, to show her, you can't do this and get away with it. And she's messed with her brother, and they messed with each other. And what I started doing, I started talking to them, and actually, let me back up. What happened was one day I took the very thing that I spanked my kids with, and I spanked myself with it. And that day I said, oh my God, that hurts. And I can see why, because they are saying that spanking can lead to aggressive behavior. There's a lot of aggression in the world, there's a lot of anger in the world. And I think the biggest thing that I had to remember is that I had to kind of wait and pause and make myself more aware of when I felt like that I wanted to spank them. Why? Why do I want to spank them? Am I trying to teach her a lesson? Am I angry? Because if I'm spanking out of anger, if I'm spanking out of teaching a lesson, what is that sending? What that energy that I have? And I'm sending that to my daughter. What is that telling her? That the way to get something done, the way to get your point across, or the way to make someone stop, a child to stop, is that you spank them. Instead of, often we have people that are in counseling sessions, seeing therapists, counselors, and they're talking about their childhood. They're talking about the whoopings. They're talking about not feeling loved, often, a lot. I don't know every conversation, but many of the adult issues that we have stem from how we perceived our childhood, whether we perceived our parents loving us or not. And I can honestly tell you, when I was looking at faces of adults spanking their children, that did not, and I'm not, this is just my perception. It did not seem like it was coming from love. It was coming more from frustration and anger. And then we turn around and want to ask, why does that adult, used to be a child, have so much anger inside of him? Why does she why didn't she feel loved as a child? That she got many spankings, and you hear people that go back to the Bible. And I've already said before that it was never about religion for me. It was more about what I resonated with. I wanted to I prayed to seek the truth. And so I know there's a Bible verse that said something about spare the rod, and it's Proverbs 13:24. It says, whoever spares the rod um, hates his son, but but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. And so when you hear that, we have a way of rationalize anything. We have a way of using it to achieve a certain goal. I mean, we can rationalize the heck out of anything and everything. And my thing is that I believe there are Bible verses that point to um, out of the heart flows the issues of life. And so if that is true, then for me, I feel like I want to get to the heart of the matter. I feel like that, and some may say, well, I can whoop them to get to the heart of the matter. Well, sometimes a child may not want to talk to you after you've whooped them, and we've seen where whoopings have gone far, leaving marks. I was reading about a story where a child was constantly whooped, beaten, and she passed on. She transitioned to the spiritual world. And I know there are many other experiences of that, But when we think about bullying behavior, when we think about kids that are beating on other kids, when we think about pushing them, often they get that from somewhere. And so what I've learned, even as a parent, is is when I communicate with my children, when I really talk to them and open it up and share with them, and they feel like they have a valid voice, that they can talk to me about stuff. When I tell them, I'm not for bullying, it's so important that, as your sister, you have an opportunity to learn how to treat a girl, a woman. And so I say the same thing for a sister, that I know that whatever groundwork you set in the home becomes a reality on the outside, becomes that how that person treats other people. And there's so much anger in the world, hence suicides, homicides, hence bullying, name calling, slander. There's so much already in the world that I believe that instead of waiting till children do something, or when children become adults and they have all this issue and stuff going on, try to talk to our children when they're younger. And when I think about the times that I did spank my children, there's a large part of me that wish I was more patient with them. Wish I had taken more time to assess my emotions and my feelings. Which each time I was like, I didn't like whooping. I didn't like it. And I felt like in my heart of hearts that it did lead to aggression, that it did lead to hateful actions. So it's something that I decided not to do, and more of communication. And I've seen the importance of really talking to my children and letting them know how I feel about certain matters. Really letting them experiencing bullying, and really them talking about what they didn't like, and not being pushed and not being name called, and getting their emotions and their feelings involved, so they can understand that if you feel that way, you're sad, you're disappointed, you feel rejected, you feel hurt that someone hurt you. How do you think others feel when you do it to them? So, and I know when we think about toddlers, how far does communication go? I remember times I would tell my son Cameron and my daughter no or stop, and they stopped. And I started talking to my kids at a young age, and there are many times that I did whip them, or spank them, and it was more of tat. It wasn't like flat out extension cord extension cord, or switch. Um, it was more of a paddle, a tap tap. And I'm not trying, and regardless of the fact, it's still considered whooping to me. It's still considered, you know, um, punishment. And if we're feeding punishment to our children, then that becomes that energy of punishment. That becomes bully punishment, domestic violence punishment, elder abuse punishment, murder punishment, shooting with a gun, fighting, fatalistic fighting punishment. There has to be another way to really, if we got more people talking, more people thinking about their emotions and feelings, more people doing awareness, being more conscious of their thoughts, what impact would that have on the world, on adults who are not now children? It's just one of those issues that I think we definitely need to talk more. If you want to think about trials, try communication tactics with toddlers, try communication tactics with children. Like I said, my mother got to a point that I think she was just like, I can't do it anymore. You're raised in that environment, and you see whoopings, and they're horrible, and she would try her best not to get a whooping, and then she started whooping, and feeling like that's the only way that you have that you can get someone else's attention. But there always is more than one way to do something. So regardless of what you have experienced, because often, we do what was done. And create a generational love cycle is about reassessing those thoughts, those behaviors behind the actions. Just because it was done to us doesn't mean that we need to do it to people. And one of the things I talk about is that we have the power, we have the right, we have an opportunity when you have a family to create the family that you want. At any time, you can change. And what's done is done. We can't go back. We can't, it's all to me about no guilt. What's done is done. But how can we make the next generation better? What conversations can we have with our adult children now in talking to them about, I did that. This is the reason why I did whoop you. But this is why I think that going forward, I don't think it's the answer. And let me tell you why. And I can have that conversation with both my children because I use that. I use, like I said, there were times I probably can count on one hand, maybe spanking for my son or maybe for my daughter in their, teenage year. They're now, Cam's a teenager. Kayla is 1 year. She's 12. But I've seen also too the power of words. I've seen the power of making sure their voices are heard. After experiencing, like I said, bullying type reactions, it's so easy to go in and become a bully yourself. And I thought that's what she was going to do. And I had to tell her, we've had that conversation about how I don't like pushing myself on others. Does that ring a bell? How you don't like violating somebody's personal space. When you think about whooping, what are we teaching them? We're into their personal space. We're forcing our will on them. You are going to behave. If not, I'm going to cause you pain. And we will hear that twisted into thoughts, like I said, of suicide and homicides. And so, as a parent who've experienced not just my mother and hearing her thoughts about whooping and being whooped as a child, the few times that I had, and then being a mother myself and understanding how you feel like you don't have another way, but knowing there should be that unsettledness that you have in that, and seeing the facial expressions and the emotions that are involved, and assessing my own emotions. I'm like, no, I need to many times I've had to really just stand still and just really gather myself. And that's not the energy I want to enforce on my children. That negative, that I'm gonna make you do something, because if you don't, you're gonna feel this and it's gonna hurt. And now that I know how it feels, now that I remember how it feels, that's not the pain that I want to bring into the world. Individual consciousness affects collective consciousness. That's not the energy I want to add to the world. The energy I want to add is seeing the heart of people. The energy I want to have is understanding people. The energy I want to have is having people to speak their voice, to assess, know, be aware of their emotions and feelings so they don't go and take out their pain on other people. That's the kind of energy that Create a Generational Love Cycle is about. It's about becoming more aware of our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts, and picking a way that benefits the us whole as a race, as a society, as people, as humanity. Because everything that I do, whatever I do as a parent, has a direct or an indirect impact on the world. And I want to teach, to raise children who think outside of the box, who can use other ways. I thought about today, I kind of was upset the kids didn't, their clothes piling up. I've done all this washing. It's about me. I've done all this washing, put your clothes up. And I thought about it and I said, I can make it exciting. I can make it fun. I can make them laugh, and because they're going to remember that, right? Maya Angelou said that it's not so much about what you said to them, right? Because you can whoop somebody and say, I love you. I love you. I'm only doing this because I love you. But it's how you make them feel. Did you make them feel pain? Did they feel like they were loved? When they saw your face, did they feel like they were loved? So I had made some notes on whooping, and it started during medieval Europe, I guess. It looks like around the fall of Western Roman Empire, around 476 AD. So whooping goes back a long time. And again, it was used as corporate punishment in schools. And when I read that, The word that stuck out was punishment. And, a lot of people are punishing people today, punishing them, taking their lives, punishing them, shooting them, punishing them, calling them outside their name, punishing them. There's too much punishment that's going on in the world. And then how we can turn that around and bring more love into the world with communication, with understanding, with awareness. All right. Timika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. Think about it. Just because you were raised a certain, I've heard people say it, that my mom raised me this way, she whooped me, so I'm going to whoop you, and look how I turned out. And the thing is, really assess that. How did you turn out? Are you afraid? Are you fearful a lot? Do you have anxious moments? When you look at yourself in the mirror, when you whoop your children, and how do you look? What's the facial expression you have? You know, what's going on inside of you? How are you feeling? Are you feeling bad? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling like, man, I'm really doing a good thing? Or do you feel like there's another way? There's another way. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Take care of yourself. This is a special edition of Create a Generational Love Cycle, where I'm tackling why I chose to communicate instead of continuing to whoop my children. I'll talk to you soon.